Francois ئگزاڤیەر لۆڤات. I belong to a family who has been living in the French colonial empire since 1750. The ancestor was a navy officer of the King of France, Louis XV, and he was in post in Saint-Louis du Sénégal, in Senegal. And even today, there are still members of my family living in Senegal. The French conquered Algeria in 1830. And at that time, a part of my family went to Algeria because they had hotel in France, and the chief of the family said, France is conquering a country on the other side of Mediterranean. The soldiers, they can live under tent, but immediately after, there will be some civil managers. And this cannot live under tent, they will need hotel. So he sent two of his sons with money to Algiers. They bought in the Kasbah, they bought some houses, and they made one of the first hotel. It was not the first, there was one before. But they made one of the first hotel in Algeria. Then the French invaded Tunisia in 1881, and my family went with the French, a part of the family, went to Tunisia in 1882. The French had a kind of colony over Morocco in 1912, and then a part of my family went to Morocco in 1914. And myself, I was born in Casablanca during the war in 1940. I spent 17 years in Morocco until the independence of Morocco. We stayed one more year, and then I had to come back to France to make my studies to be civil engineer. So I made 1 year. After 1 year in the process of the studies, during the 3 months of summer holidays, we had to work on a project and to make a report. And so I didn't want to stay in France. So in Iran, I found a company called Zhikov, which was a group of French engineers. They were making a dam over Sefidroud in the Elbouz mountain between the part of Iran and the Caspian Sea. So I worked there as a young civil engineer, and they had Kurds there. They told me about the Kurdish problem, and at that time, nobody was talking about the Kurds, nobody at all. The Kurds didn't exist. In Turkey, there were no Kurds, there were Turks from the mountains. Here, there were Sunni, and in Iran, there were donkeys of the mountain, no Kurds. And being from this colonialist family, I say, well, if nobody talks about the Kurds, I have to do it. So I quit my school for engineering. I came to Paris. I made the school for cinema because I thought that the future of the news would be television. And there were no school for television. So I made a school for cinema. And when I got my diploma, I went to join Mullah Mustafa Barzani in Iraqi Kurdistan. And this was another totally mad adventure because I was in contact with Emir Kamoran Bedi Khan, and the only way I had to meet Mullah Mustafa was on the back of his business card. It's still in one of my books. He said, Lova is going to make a report about the Kurds. And I mean, nobody will do this. With only this, it's impossible. But, well, I was 20 years old, and so I managed. I went to Istanbul by train. Then in Istanbul, I met some Kurdish students, and they told me after several days the best way to go to join Mullah Mustafa is to go to Syria. So I took a train to Aleppo. In Aleppo, I met some other Kurds. They took me by night, disguised as an Arab, because it was absolutely forbidden to go to Iraqi Kurdistan. So in a truck by night, they took me to Kamishli, and then after a few days, we passed the Tigris River on a raft made of air chambers, and then I arrived. I met the first Peshmerga. We walked to Zaho, and then near Zaho I met Isaswar. He gave me 11 Peshmerga to protect me because it was a war at that time, mid-January. We walked to join Mullah Mustafa. I have pictures of the day where I met him, and I had some letters from Emir Kamoran Bedi Khan. I gave him. He started to read, and then Emir Kamoran Bedi Khan was telling him that I was going there to make the first television documentary ever made on the Kurds. When my 23 minutes film was shown all over the world, and in October 1963, Emir Kamoran Bedi Khan presented my report to the United Nations in New York. So after this, it was impossible to ignore the Kurds. When I decided to make television documentary about the Kurds, I learned Kurdish language. There is a school in France called National School for Oriental Languages. And Emir Kamoran Bedi Khan was the professor of Kurd. So I met him when I was learning the Kurdish language. Mullah Mustafa had an interpreter called Anwar Mirza, and Anwar Mirza told me that I was speaking with Mullah Mustafa in Kurdish all the time. In the National School for Oriental Languages, we learn grammatical. I mean, the Kurds were not allowed to learn Kurdish at school, but that's what I did. So I was speaking very good grammatical Kurdish. I spent 5 months in Kurdistan, and about 3 months I was with him all the time. But because sometimes, for example, I wanted to film a destroyed helicopter, so I had to walk 200 kilometers. So then I was not with him, but For about 3 months, I was with him all the time. I was in the Battle of Batufa, and then I was sometimes they had some very short battles with the Iraqi army. I was in some of these, but most of the battles were not with the Iraqi army, but with Jash tribes, most of the battles. And Mullah Mustafa always tried to negotiate, always. But to negotiate, you need a strong hand. So that's why they attacked sometimes a tribe, they beat them, then they negotiate. Emir Kamran Bedi Khan, I give him my pictures and I say I don't want to be paid. So I have never been paid for the use of my pictures. So he started to contact everybody, then people, especially news people. Then I said, okay, but can we have some? So he sent slides, they use them, but they never send them back, which is typical of the news people. When they have got what they want, they don't care about you anymore. So only 250 pictures were saved, and I published them in this book called Eylul. I came back in 1997 or 96, yeah, when they had the civil war between KDP and PUK. So I came back for this. I made a lot of pictures, and then I made the first book about Kurdistan, Iraq at war, because it was a war. Then I made a second book, which was the history of the Kurds. As a backbone, I took the history of the KDP. Then I made a third book about Eylul. The fourth one was Kurdistan, Land of God. And the last one was the life of Mullah Mustafa. And always, all the events who concern the Kurds all over the world, all the time. So when I came back, people say, oh, Lۆڤات is a very good war reporter. So I have been a war reporter through my life. I spent 6 months in the war in Biafra, 6 months in the war in Vietnam with the Americans. I covered Beirut from 75 to 88. I covered the war Iran-Iraq from 81 to 88. I covered the war in Angola, in Uganda, 5 times with the Fronte Polisario. I covered all the wars. Now I am 83 now, but even recently I was still going to take pictures in Guer. And this is the Medal of Barzan. It was given to me by Kak Massoud. And that's a picture of mine with Lokman Barzani in '63. And the picture is in my book on Eylul. This was when Mullah Mustafa was giving a speech in, at that time it was Kosenjak in Koya. This was given to me by Mullah Mustafa because I followed the conference of Kosenjak, which was the end of March, beginning of April 1963. And then it started a certain time, so I had a Kurdish clothes made for me, And then I had one, and Mullah Mustafa said, no, Lۆڤات, you need two. And next day, he gave me this, I think from the bazaar, but he gave it to me, so I had two. And well, for the rest, they are my books. I mean, all of them are always made of pictures. Of course, many of these are from archives, but all these are mine. So this is well. That's can I say? It's what happened to Kurdistan, linked to the life of Mullah Mustafa when he was in Russia and all these kind of things. So that's what they call a Berno fact. Well, it's the Moser from the First World War, but very efficient in the mountain because there's a very long barrel, so in the mountain it's very precise. When a Kalashnikov is not precise at all. But Kalashnikov, you send 25 bullets, but then you send one, the 4th of March, and it was in Kanimaran. And he was waiting for Fouadaref, who came in a helicopter from Baghdad. And I was passing, and I saw that the light, I asked him, can I? He said, yes, so I came here so to get the light on the side. He was very careful with the little people. Like several times some Peshmerga went to see him, saying they fall in love with a young woman, but they had no money to marry her, and he gave them the money. And recently, I was telling this, and the young man said, well, that's how my parents marry, with the money given by Mullah Mustafa. The 8th of February, 1963, we were Mullah Mustafa, Colonel Kafi, Mam Ajar, me, and 2 or 3 listening to the radio because they had the coup in Baghdad where they killed General Qassem. And so Colonel Kafi was saying it's time to attack everywhere the Iraqi army, because if Qassem has been killed, they don't know what to do. So they will surrender, or they will not fight, because maybe tomorrow Qassem will be replaced by somebody who is going to be with the Kurds. So, and Mullah Mustafa said, it's not because our Arab brother have problems that we have to take profit of this. But in fact, already they were negotiating with the Baas party. The Baas wanted to take the power, and in this case, what will happen with the Kurds? And so when they had the coup in Baghdad, the Kurds were already negotiating with the Baas. So, I mean, he always tried to negotiate. Then they send somebody, I think they sent Fouadaref to negotiate with Mullah Mustafa, and the same night he told us that they just took the power, they are very weak, and they are trying to save time. So they are trying to promise things to us so that we shall stay, we shall keep cool. And so they are just trying to save time until they are powerful enough, and then they will attack us again. That's what happened. There's a book written by Jonathan Randall. Jonathan Randall was the correspondent of Time magazine, which is considered even today as the best news magazine of history. And he dedicated the book to me, and he said that he was in charge of Middle East, based in Paris. And he said that before me, he never heard of the Kurds. Then he started to make articles with Jim Wilde about the Kurds from my pictures and my interviews and so on. But then Time magazine was like the Bible. When Time magazine started to make articles about the Kurds, all the others magazines like Stern, Newsweek, L'Express, they had to make something. So they started, who are the Kurds? Because at that time, nobody talked about the Kurds. The Kurds didn't exist. And so from this first article in a Time magazine, then all the world started to talk about the Kurds.